Good morning. Welcome to this service of the Unitarian Society of New Haven. My name is Jim Peters. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm honored to be your worship associate today. If you're joining us for the first time, we're very glad you chose to spend this time with us. The email address of the membership team is on the screen, and you can visit usnh.org to find out a lot more about us. We are a congregation that believes Black Lives Matter, that every person has the right to affirm their own gender identity, that all people are inherently worthy. We acknowledge that our sanctuary sits on lands traditionally that of the Quinnipiac and other Native peoples. As a congregation, we seek to heal the wounds of the past and present in the ongoing work of reconciliation and justice seeking. All of us are imperfect, but we are here to drop our defenses and trust that what happens in worship is powerful and life-giving. Together we affirm that this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than we were when we rose this morning. Welcome.
I am Pavel Vostik, past Youth Trustee of the UUA Board of Trustees. Our service today will share highlights of the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly 2020. GA was 100% virtual for the first time this year due to the COVID pandemic. Notably, we had the largest attendance in history, over 4,000 people. 12 members of our congregation attended some or all of GA. 8 of us were delegates. We met only weeks after the murder of George Floyd, as Black Lives Matter supporters called for defunding the police and redirecting resources to education, healthcare, and housing. GA also occurred in the context of our current congregational study action issue, Undoing Intersectional White Supremacy, the report on the Commission on Institutional Change, which addresses white supremacy culture in our denomination, and our continued discussion of the eighth principle. As has been true for the past several GAs, workshops and worship were focused on decentering whiteness, anti-racism, and the white supremacist culture within ourselves, within our relationship to one another, and within our communities. This has particular relevance this year on the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower and the colonizing of indigenous peoples' lands. Our GA theme this year was rooted, inspired, and ready. Rooted in our liberal religious traditions. Rooted in our history of seeking justice, and rooted in our principles and sources. Inspired to respond to the call of these complicated, uncertain times. Inspired by worship and wisdom of sibling UUs. Inspired by those who are working to create the beloved community. Ready to examine our internalized white supremacy. Ready to address the changes called for by the report on the Commission on Institutional Change, and ready to move beyond talking to action.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come found, unrolls in the winter time, when hope is hard to
This traveling chalice has been with me since I purchased it at GA several years ago. Its tiny size allows me to take it everywhere. We light this chalice to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We recognize that these are not just words to be spoken. Instead, they call us out of our comfort into an ever-deepening commitment. A commitment we make to the rights of all whose worth and dignity are denied, diminished, or destroyed by systems of oppression. And they call us into a practice of looking into our own hearts with courage and honesty.
Let us turn our attention now to the concerns of this community. I invite you to join me in holding in our hearts the joy and sorrow of those we hold dear, closing your eyes and going inward if you are comfortable doing so. This week, some have borne sorrow so great they ask for the help of this community to bear it. Others hold a joy so great it must be shared. Jane and Larry Copes are happy that Jane is recovering from surgery in May. They look forward to the time when we can truly be together again. Tom Harden is now home from rehab and recovering from his bout with COVID-19. Our thoughts are with all of us who are missing friends and family as we maintain social distance and work to keep each other safe.
How to Survive the Apocalypse by Sean Parker Dennison. First, learn to listen. Not only for enemies around corners and hidden places, but for the faint footsteps of hope and the whisper of resistance. Hone your skills, aim your heart towards kindness, and stockpile second chances. Under the weight of destruction, we will need the strong shelter of forgiveness and the deeper wells that give the sweet water of welcome. We have a place for you. When the world ends, we must not add destruction to destruction, not accept a beggar's bargain to fight death with more death. In order to survive the apocalypse, any apocalypse, we have to give up the counterfeit currency of self-sufficiency, the mistaken addiction to competition, the lie that the last to die has somehow survived.
There will be better days. 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 Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better days. I am there will be better days. 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 Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better days. Let the wave wash over. There will be better days. There will be better days. There will be better better days.
Good morning. These are my reflections on the 2020 General Assembly. I have been an off-site delegate to the General Assembly for the 3 previous years. So hearing that this year was going to be all virtual, I knew it would not be much different for me. But it was different. I had access to all the available workshops. In the past, there were a limited number of workshops to which off-site delegates had access. I attended great workshops and meaningful morning worship services. But what I want to focus on are the 2 actions of immediate witness, or AIWs for short. I am so proud of voting affirmatively for an AIW that addressed 400 years of white supremacist colonialism. It addressed the plight of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. After living on their tribal lands in Massachusetts for more than 12,000 years, in March of this year, the tribe was notified that their reservation lands were being terminated by the federal government. So far, a federal judge has temporarily blocked the taking of the Mashpee Wampanoag's lands. We voted as the UUA General Assembly to gather in solidarity with this tribe, as well as the Standing Rock Nation, who has 5 water protectors in prison. The second action of immediate witness addressed the long-standing issue of police brutality, and we committed to shaping a world in which love and justice may thrive, where Black leadership, creativity, and resilience is celebrated, while Black grief is honored and held with love. We resolved to create systematic change within our congregations regarding our relationship with the police, and to engage in creating transformative justice processes. These AIWs express actions to which we commit to positively engage. The work of justice starts now.
I've been a member here for 34 years. This was my 3rd General Assembly, or GA, but the first time I attended without being a delegate. Both experiences have added to my awareness of being connected to the Unitarian Universalist community beyond our congregation. This makes me more interested in how GA and the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, works on the world stage, as well as offering resources to us. I am grateful that I was able to afford the $150 registration fee, which gave me access to everything except voting, which our delegates took care of. Thank you to them. I participated with UU the Vote, attended worship services, workshops, and talks from the comfort of my home. For the first time, all that was offered is available to watch or re-watch, at least till the end of the summer, in the on-demand library included with my registration. I heard the report from the 3-year Commission on Institutional Change with many insights and recommendations. I am hopeful that the UUA will use these recommendations to continue struggling against racism and any form of dehumanization within our denomination, because we have to, in support of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I attended talks by Howard Bryant, author of Full Dissonance, who expanded my awareness of white supremacy, and this year's Ware lecturer, Naomi Klein, author of No Is Not Enough. I'm excited by her reflections on the intersectionality of climate change, capitalism, racism, homelessness, and the myth that it's too much to deal with these all together. We've been dealing with them all together since March. There was music to enjoy and sing along with, and much that I didn't get to participate in. That's always true at GA. I'll be watching more as the summer proceeds and I'm glad to get to do so. I invite you to consider attending next year's GA. It's an amazing resource from which more of us could be nurtured and feel connected, even if we do so from our home. La 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 la
My friend Becky Sandman shared these thoughts with me. One of the many things I attended was an inspiring talk called Spiritual Friendships Transcending Differences with Reverend Dr. John Burns, past president of the UUA. Also, Dr. Phyllis Cole, Rochelle Fortier-Nwadibia, and Reverend Lisa Garcia Sampson. Dr. Burns spoke about our social justice work that is rooted in our transcendentalist ancestors' commitment to abolition and suffrage during the 19th century. He reminded us that Transcendentalist minister Reverend Theodore Parker hid travelers on the Underground Railroad in his parsonage and kept a gun in his pulpit to protect them. The gun had belonged to his grandfather, one of the Minutemen of the American Revolution. We learned that Parker inspired two of the phrases Barack Obama had woven into the rug for the Oval Office: government of all the people, by all the people, and for all the people, which Lincoln used in the Gettysburg Address, and the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, which was used repeatedly by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Reverend Burns pointed out that at the heart of the abolitionists' work were enduring spiritual friendships that transcended gender, theology, age, social class, and race. Parker, for example, developed a deep friendship with Frederick Douglass in their work for social justice. When Burns visited Parker's grave on a trip to Italy, he discovered that the monument atop the grave had been paid for by Douglass, who hired a renowned sculptor to create it. Burns reminds us that the Transcendentalist generation, a rebel generation, all young adults at the time, committed themselves to both the idea and the practice of egalitarian spiritual friendships, and engaged in conversations that would be truly transformative and transcend differences for the sake of the broader, wider, deeper common good. As Reverend Dr. Burns emphasized, this is a discipline and skill that we need to revive today if we are going to grow or be respectful partners in social justice. Reinforcing Dr. Burns' words, Reverend Lisa Garcia Sampson reminds us that many UUs of privilege struggle with feeling that we know best in our immigrant accompaniment work, in our voting rights work, in our work to combat white supremacy. We feel that we know best how activism should be done, how people can be most useful to the cause. Alternatively, transformational organizing is a deeply relational and collaborative work. It calls for us to follow the lead and amplify the work of those who are most impacted by oppression. This type of organizing creates space for everyone to bring their gifts to the table. If that happens, when that happens, the table overflows with gifts and ideas and offerings beyond our wildest imagination.
General Assembly for me is a time of deep discernment and reflection. I have to try really hard not to be overwhelmed and pulled into every single workshop, lecture, worship gathering, and general session. This year, like last year, I focused on how I could deepen my commitment to living an anti-racist life. This is, of course, a lifetime spiritual practice, and GA has been a great tool. Once again, the programs I attended were led by non-white facilitators.
GA models a way to dismantle white supremacy culture, as evidenced by the topics and the speakers selected. Let me lift up some of the highlights. While we could not be personally present at GA, UU the Vote created an opportunity for us to do justice work together throughout GA. UU the Vote is an anti-racism initiative of the UUA to fight voter suppression. In collaboration with Reclaim Our Vote, UU the Vote provided training and opportunities to do phone banking during GA. Over 117,000 calls were made to voters of color in Texas to ensure that they had the necessary information to vote early in the Senate runoff. The UUA has invested money, dedicated staff, and created opportunities for our congregations to build a movement that will continue long after the 2020 election, with the goal of bringing about real systemic change. USNH is participating in this effort, and we have sent out almost 5,000 cards to date. Like Becky, I love the esteemed Reverend Dr. John Barron's discussion of the intentional practice of developing and maintaining spiritual friendships that transcend differences. So often I hear from USNH members that we don't have enough diversity in our congregation, or worse yet, that we have no friends of color. Interrupting racism takes courage and intentionality. We all need to be in places where whites are not a majority. The New Haven area is rich with opportunities, starting with Connect. I know my spiritual friendships, thank you, Reverend Dr. Barons, for giving me a way to describe them, have been among the most meaningful relationships of my life. The aha moment for me at GA was a recognition that my spiritual direction is not to focus on anti-racism work. Instead, I have set my compass on living an anti-racist life. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not encouraging the end of anti-racism work, but rather suggesting that work alone will not get us to where we need to go. The late civil rights leader Vincent Harding poignantly posed the following questions, which I continue to ponder. What is the America that we dream, that we hope for, what we vow to help bring into being? To whom do we think America belongs? And who has the essential responsibility for its future? I believe we must live that answer with our whole being. For me, that means continuously and every day noticing my patterns of racism, interrupting patterns of racism that show up, reading and learning, doing anti-racism work, developing spiritual friendships, and moving into radical change. I do not think that anti-racist work is a separate part of being human and an end unto itself. Shifting and disrobing from the grip of white supremacy requires us to transform our entire sense of self and how we show up in our lives. May it be so.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love.
Rather than sharing a reflection, I'm sharing a portion of the John Murray Distinguished Lecture, Individual Salvation, Collective Liberation, given by Reverend Schuyler Vogel, Senior Minister of Fourth Universalist Society of New York. That's the congregation with which we're working on UU the Vote.
There is a growing sense in our congregation that being a member at Fourth Universalist means being someone who cares about justice. And not just cares, but does something about it. The image of religious community and justice work are interwoven to the point of being the same. It would be very hard, I believe, to be a member at this congregation without embracing the work of systematic social change. Now, this has been unintentional, but in a congregation that has been fractured and dysfunctional for close to 100 years, this unity of purpose has brought a sense of togetherness, an ability to move swiftly and together to meet challenges of our time, to move from a place of health. This was evident as early as 2017, following the election, when I received a call from a community organizer. It was shortly after this election, and they shared with me just how much fear and uncertainty there was in the immigrant communities that they were organizing with. They asked us as a congregation if we would consider being a sanctuary, a place to protect undocumented immigrants fearing deportation. Now, I had never been in these waters before. It was an uncertain time. It was a scary time for everyone. So I told the board that day, and 2 days later, they decided to put the question to the congregation. Should we be a congregation that welcomes immigrants who are undocumented into our space? And the conversation there was stunning to me. There was no debate about whether it was the right thing to do, even though it was legally questionable. There was no foot dragging or grumbling about being too political. There was no committees formed to bat the idea back and make extensive plans to make sure that we were all perfect and ready for whenever that happened. There were no surveys taken beforehand to see what people thought. The congregation understood itself as being presented with a simple choice. That when community allies ask you to show up and do something, especially on behalf of vulnerable people, you do it. With less than 2 days' notice, the congregation voted unanimously. I was shocked, but I was also really proud. This was evident again when a year later the congregation actually took a family into sanctuary, a mother and her 2 children. The mother had fled gang violence in Guatemala. She had suffered at the hands of U.S. border agents and been assaulted sexually while in detention, and only wanted to stay in this country, because she loved it. She believed in America. She wanted to be with her children and be safe from fear. The congregation embraced them and her family as their own, loving them so dearly that they even became members. It hasn't always been easy. We found swastikas carved on our beautiful front doors shortly after becoming a sanctuary church. We've had White Lives Matter nonsense spray painted over our stately limestone building. But instead of recoiling or changing course or sinking into fear, the congregation has consistently doubled down. And it has brought people together. The community around us has come together to hold us in love and solidarity. After the swastikas, we welcomed over 500 people to our sanctuary to condemn hate. Congressman Jerry Nadler spoke. Journalist Bill Moyers spoke. It was powerful. We felt held. Our congregation's commitment to justice, unequivocally, has not only brought unity, but also growth. Learning to be unapologetic and uncompromising has led to increased diversity and institutional health. And the reason why this is all possible is that we have embraced a new version of universalism. A kind of universalism that is no longer concerned about universal welcome. A kind of universalism that doesn't care about making people feel comfortable or cozy or sheltered in their beliefs. It's a universalism that instead is about collective liberation. Universalism and collectivism are two words that have a lot in common. They suggest solidarity and togetherness of purpose. They suggest action rather than passive reception. They do not pretend that we are the same or should be the same or should all be universalists together and that makes us feel good, or that we can be all things to all people. Most importantly, universal liberation would not sacrifice justice for false unity or fear of hurt feelings. It uses justice to build real unity, which means showing up for people who really are in need. Now, I know out there that there are many people who are wary of social justice becoming a Unitarian Universalist creed. I get that. I do. We don't like creeds, and frankly, if we had one, I probably would be left out. But centering social justice is no more creedal than centering our 7 principles. If you read them, it's so clear that social justice is in them. Every single one. It's undeniable. If social justice feels creedal to you, then the principles should feel creedal to you. And then we have a bigger problem, because those have been around for a long time and we use them everywhere. But even if it wasn't in the principles, the world is too full of suffering, too full of hurt and pain and inequality and injustice for us as moral people to not make it the center of what we do. We can be all spiritual and deep and profound, but if we know that there are kids trapped in cages and are dying, and we do nothing, we are nothing short of complicit. If we praise ourselves as scholars or theologians or being above the political fray, but we know that Black and brown Americans are being killed on the streets in terrifying rates, and we do nothing, we are heartless. If people can't get health care for their families, that's life and death for them. It's not politics. The universalism of the future doesn't make excuses for inaction or uncaring. It doesn't say, well, it's okay if justice isn't your thing. It doesn't say, well, it's okay if you think certain policies are the same, or that the role of the church is about personal spirituality, or that neutrality means that you aren't choosing a side, and that moderation is a virtue. The universalism of the future is universalist not because everyone is just under the same roof and feeling cozy and comfortable together, or that the circle is drawn wide enough to bring everybody in. Its universality comes from its universal care. It fights for everyone. It's concerned for everyone. It cares about everyone. Not about their cozy feelings of feeling okay and unpolitical. This new universalism refuses to center those who have always been in the center, catering to that. It's universalist because it is less about us and our congregations and more about who we serve and care for. Should we want everyone who comes into our UU congregations to feel good and welcome in a true and deep and profound way? Of course. We are a place that offers sanctuary and love. That is something that should never go away. And it should continue to be our work and our challenge to make that especially true for those who have been historically shut out, for those for whom our cultures of white supremacy have made our congregations unsafe and unwelcoming. We need to work on that and keep working on that. Would we welcome those who are sincere and in need of spiritual community and are still learning their path? Of course. But should we be willing to say loudly and boldly that universalism means fighting for collective liberation and the liberation of everyone? Yes, absolutely. Will we lose some people? Yes. But what I've seen at Fourth Universalist is that we will gain plenty more. Plenty who appreciate the clarity of mission. Plenty who have been yearning for a religion to say what it means and does what it says. Plenty who are tired of the banality and religious piffle and are longing for real work to do, real change to contribute and offer, and to make the world a better place. Real allies in the fight. Now, I know this is a paradigm shift. It views justice not as a moral choice, not as just one many ways that we can experience our spirituality, but it views it as a moral necessity. It's not about your opinion or about a choice, but about fundamental human decency. If we are too afraid to make this clear and draw a line in our universalist sand, in today's world, we will lose our soul and forfeit our integrity and slip into irrelevance. What will this new universalism look like? What principles will ground in? There are a few principles that we need, I think, return to again and again to remind us of what this world needs to look like and what this new universalism, this universal liberation, looks like. We need to assume that there is more suffering and pain out there than we know and can understand, especially those of us with privilege. We need to center and learn from the voices and experiences of those on the margins always, because the stories that most of us hear, the histories most of us are told, the news that most of us experience excludes and minimizes those who are suffering the most. We need to understand that power reinforces power, and that those with the power are more often working for their own selfish interests than not. It's true for corporations, it's true for the wealthy, it's true for those who are in government. To assume otherwise is naive and dangerous and ignorant of history. We need to internalize that white supremacy continues to harm countless lives each and every day, not just nationally, but in our own congregations, cities, and towns. We need to recognize that our system of economics, which rewards consumerism and personal greed and the commodification of human labor and the earth's bounty, is by its very nature exploitative, oppressive, and spiritually compromised. We need to learn that we set a very low bar for goodness if it is simply about being nice or caring for those we know or identify with. We need to raise the bar so that goodness means justice. It means understanding that human suffering is not just a personal thing, but a systematic thing. We need to know that status quo for millions of Americans means living in crisis, fear, and pain, and that the status quo itself is not okay or morally acceptable. A moderate path is not the path of universalism. That if the normal times do not feel like a crisis to you, it's because you have enough privilege to be sheltered from it. And finally, we need to recognize that nothing will get better unless something drastic changes in our society. Systems and structures must change. The old ways will not work and do not work. Whatever being a good universalist means in the future, it means learning to know and experience the world differently than we've done before. It requires great humility on the part of us with privilege. It requires learning and intentionally seeking out what we do not know, the stories that are not being told, the voices we are not hearing. It requires knowing when to cede space to others as an ally and when to take up more space because our privilege protects us. It's not enough just to give to your church or show up on Sunday, or to read the Bible, or to think deeply. It's not just enough for your pastor to preach a good sermon on something. It's not good enough just to pay your taxes or vote or post on Facebook your outrage. We need, and the universalism of the future needs to care enough to do something about it, to see justice as a spiritual practice, to take risks. Ministers need to be community organizers. Congregations need to be hubs of community activism. For all the 250 years of American Universalism, we have seen our faith struggle with what love means. We've seen the power of knowing that God loves us, about the imperative that we should love just as deeply, about how that love includes everyone and everything on this planet, no matter what. But now Universalism today must go deeper, into a world where we understand that love is not simply a feeling, not simply the act of welcoming people into our space, but as a motivator for universal liberation and radical social change. I don't want anyone to have the experience that we had in the ER that day. I don't want anyone to feel dehumanized or feel like they live in a society that doesn't care about them. And I don't want anyone to see a faith that calls itself universalist, pretending simply that it's universalist because we say over and over again that all are welcome in our buildings. There is far too much suffering in this world to play it that safe. The universalism of the future needs to teach us that unless we are challenging the status quo, unless we know that the status quo is a crisis, we are failing the legacy we've inherited. We are failing our fellow human beings. This is not a moment to be above the fray, to worry about offending people who prefer moderation to real action. We can't care about feeling cozy. We can't sacrifice justice on behalf of those not yet ready or willing to join the fight. We must move beyond the goal of universal welcome in its shallowest form and move towards the goal of universal liberation. We have to believe that this is true to our faith's history. We have to believe it is right for our moment now. And I pray now, and I will keep praying, that it will lead us forward to a better future. May it be so. Thank you, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will. We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we're there. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We know we're there. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We'll know we're there. Oh yeah, yeah. 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 We'll know we're there.
Each week, we lift up the spiritual value of generosity by taking an offering for the ministries of this congregation. We know that these days we cannot physically pass a plate one to another, but the need for your support is ongoing, and I urge you to follow the instructions on your screen, to visit usnh.org, click on the plate donation button to make a contribution. Vital efforts, including UU the Vote, are supported by our collective generosity. Please consider making a donation now. I thank you as the offering is gratefully received.
Where you go, I will go, Mother Earth. Where you go, I will go. Where you lie, I will lie, Mother Earth. Where you lie, I will lie. And your people are my people. Your people are mine. And your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, immigrants. Where you go, I will go. And where you lie, I will lie, immigrants. Where you lie, I will lie. And your people are my people. Your people are mine. And your people are my people. You're divine, my divine.
Anytime.
We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The Reverend Elizabeth Wynne, during Saturday worship, reflected that there are many times in our lives when we are both so ready and so not ready to take on the challenges before us. I leave you with the charge she shared with us at the end of that worship. We are so ready and so not ready. We are facing beauty and brutality, love and loss. May we find a way to act for justice and for all of our thriving, even though we may feel so unready. May we know that our ancestors who have been ready and not ready have been with us all along. Bless that our hearts are ready for justice. Bless that we are never ready and always ready, both at once. Amen, Ashe, may it be.